Up until this point, we have a large portion of the Black Ops 4 story covered. We've looked at a bunch of specialist characters, we've even looked at some characters who weren't in the game. Last week we looked at the story of Blackout, but one of the new characters who is fresh to Black Ops 4, we still haven't touched. And quite honestly, he is one of the characters with the least amount of backstory in the entire series. This, as you guys can clearly tell by the title of the video, is Torque. Now, as always, guys, if you do enjoy this series, you like when I dive deep into the specialist backstories, and you want to see more videos like this one, the way to show me is simply hitting that like button. The more likes these video gets, it just shows me that you enjoy them, and then the more likely I am to make these videos in the future. So if you enjoy what you see, be sure to hit that like button. But let's get back to the story. So as far as Torque goes, we don't really have a ton of information to go off of. We have his bio, we have his cutscene, and really, that's pretty much it. But as you guys know by now, with this series, as always, we dig a little bit deeper, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. But first, to do that, we have to understand his backstory. So let's start off with his cutscene.
The infamous Corporal Kieran McKay?
Aye, that's me.
Impressive record. Multiple commendations for engineering excellence, with reprimands for insubordination, failures of discipline, and willful destruction of Army property.
Well, I don't always think things through.
It says here that you're serving 3 weeks for hospitalizing your CO. Care to talk me through it?
Bunch of rookies on base, barely 3 days in. Failed surprise inspection. That ray of sunshine decided the best way to teach them the error of their ways was to run them into the ground. 2 of them developed hypothermia. Figured I'd give him a dose of his own medicine. Or at the very least, a dose of some of the strongest bowel unblockers I could find in the infirmary. That fucker got to do some running of his own that night. Never could stand bullies.
Well, Corporal McKay, I've got a proposition for you that I think will be mutually beneficial.
So we don't get to hear what the proposition is, but based off of this cutscene, we do get to learn a lot about who Torque is, and even more about his personality and what he stands for. Now, Torque's real name is Kieran McKay, and he is Scottish, and as we find out from his bio, he actually joined the British Army and eventually became a part of the Engineer Division. Now, actually, recently he had a birthday. His birth date is January 3rd, 2013, which makes him 6 as of right now, but at the time of the events of Black Ops 4 makes him around 30 to 33 years old. And at the time of the events of Black Ops 3 would make him about 50 to 53 years old, which compared to the other specialist characters actually doesn't make him too old to be in that game. So it brings up the question, why was Torque not in Black Ops 3, which we'll address later on in this video. Now, as we find out from Torque's bio, he grew up in Leith, Scotland with a kind of underprivileged background. His parents were unemployed and he spent most of his free time exploring a junkyard, but that's how he got his affinity for broken gadgets, repairing them, and creating his own inventions. Now, from the very beginning, he exhibited very poor judgment. He was the kind of kid who was always pulling pranks on his friends or even authority figures, and as we've seen through his entire life, he has had a problem with authority figures, as we saw in his cutscene. He then was eager to help his parents pay for things, so he joined the army at the age of 16. Then, going forward, he joined the British Engineering Corps because, as we talked about, he's very good with gadgets and he's very good at engineering his own inventions. So after this, the one giant takeaway we can learn about Torque is, first of all, he does not like authority figures, and when they are there, oftentimes he pushes against them, especially if they are a bully. As we found out from his cutscene, he didn't like his superior officer, so he went and gave him a bunch of laxatives. So now that we know who Torque is, what he's all about, we can now look at the things that to me are a little bit more interesting. The first of which is, if we look at the very end cutscene in the Specialist HQ, we see all of the Specialist characters joining together to fight against Savannah. The interesting thing is, though, is in this cutscene, a bunch of characters are missing, one of which is Torque. Now, we've talked about some reasonings behind this, and the general consensus is that the characters that aren't here are the ones that decided to side with Savannah, hence why you don't see them in this group of people. The biggest example of this, and the one I've talked about the most in previous videos, is the new specialist character, Zero. It actually makes a lot of sense for her to be a bad character, and once again, I talked about that in her specialist story. I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check that one out. But the interesting thing about Torque is it doesn't make sense for him not to be here. Why do I say that? As we talked about, he already doesn't like authority figures, and especially doesn't like bullies. The exact description of Savannah. She was his boss, she turned evil. You would think that this is the exact thing that Torque would want to fight against. So it once again leaves the question, why is he not in this scene? Now, of course, there is that option that he decided to side with Savannah. In fact, there is another character who is said to be a prankster, and that would be Zero. And we already talked about how it sounds like she decided to side with Savannah. So maybe that's a possibility, but based off of who Torque is, I very highly doubt it. Now, something else that I found interesting is the map frequency is a watch facility. In other words, they overwatch all of the specialist characters, and throughout this map you can see several screens with individual specialist characters on it. As you can see, the one we're looking at here has Battery. If you turn around, you got one with Ruin and then Seraph. So this is definitely an area where you'd expect to see something about Torque. In fact, if you go to this wall over here, you can see even more characters, including Firebreak and Recon. Now, the interesting part about this is that once again, if we go to that same image before, the characters that are missing in this cutscene are also the characters that are missing from this room. You're missing Torque, you're missing Zero, and you are also missing Crash. Now, like I said, this could fit in with what we saw before. This could fit in with the idea that all of these characters are still working with Savannah, so they don't need to be monitored. But I have another idea. What if it means that these characters are dead? You may notice that all of the characters that are missing from that cutscene are also the ones that don't return in Black Ops 3, except for one. Recon. Recon's in this image that we're looking at here, and of course, as we know, he doesn't return in Black Ops 3. Now, we did talk about this in a previous video. I made a video on Recon's specialist story and talked about in that video how it's possible that he actually died in a mission working for the specialist characters. And we already discussed that in that video. The difference is the timing. I think Recon possibly died later than the other characters. The question is, why do I say that? So to be honest with you, this is just a theory. I don't have a lot of evidence to back up this other than the specialist character's behavior. First of all, the only time throughout the specialist story that we see all of the specialist character is at the very beginning cutscene when they first go to Savannah's mansion. And as this cutscene continues, you can see Savannah coming down the elevator with two characters, Seraph and Crash. Now, it would make sense if these two characters stayed and worked with Savannah, as they appear to be her right and left-hand men. But as we know, Seraph bailed and works with Jessica Mason Green, so the question is, what do Torque and Crash have in common? And really, the only thing these two characters have in common is the fact that both of them don't really listen to rules. Crash was a gambling addict who spent all his money and didn't care what trouble he got into. Torque disobeys all his authority figures and got into this position because of that. And as we know, Savannah has no problem with killing people, as we saw her basically attempt to murder her sister. So the two characters that would outwardly fight against Savannah, Crash and Torque, are not in this final cutscene. Could it be because they tried to fight against Savannah openly and Savannah just simply had them killed? Or could it be that they ended up deciding to side with her? If I'm honest with you, I don't have the answer. I tried to dig deeper, find more information, but I had nothing. So if you have any ideas or theories, feel free to let me know what you think down in the comments, and maybe I can address this in a future video. But there is one other point I would like to address in this video, and it's the fact that there is a character in that cutscene we just watched that no one's seen before. It's not a specialist character in Black Ops 4, and may actually be a future specialist character to come to the game. And it's this character to the right of the screen here. Now, I think the reason why this went under a lot of people's radars is that this character is bald, so everyone assumed that it was Ajax. However, in this exact same image, Ajax can be seen across the other side of the room. In fact, throughout this cutscene, all of the other specialist characters are accounted for. So who is this mysterious burly bald man? Well, that we can possibly address in a future video. So if you would like to see that in a future video, the way to show me is simply hit that like button. The more likes that this video gets, the more likely I am to make that video in the future, because it shows me that you want to see it. So if you want to see that in the future, simply hit that like button, and if you want to stay up to date on all of the videos on my channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and have notifications turned on, as it's the best way to stay up to date on all my video. And as I mentioned before, if you have any theories on Torque, who the mystery character is, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this to us.